Basic pawn movement. A pawn moves forward one square at a time, and it can never move backward or sideways under any circumstance. This restriction alone makes it different from every other piece on the board. Since bishops, rooks, and queens can retreat whenever they need to, the pawn's forward-only nature reflects its original symbolism in chess history, representing foot soldiers who advance into battle without the option of retreat. Because of this, a pawn's position on the board tells you something permanent about the game, since once it moves forward, that square behind it is gone for good. The two-square first move. Any pawn that has not yet moved is allowed to advance 2 squares forward instead of just one, but only on its very first move. This rule was added centuries after the original version of chess to speed up the opening phase of the game, since players grew tired of waiting several turns just to get pawns into contact with each other. Once a pawn uses this option, or moves a single square, the privilege disappears permanently for that pawn. It matters strategically because it lets players contest the center of the board immediately, shaping the entire character of the opening. Diagonal capturing. Unlike its forward movement, a pawn captures enemy pieces only by moving one square diagonally, never straight ahead. This creates an unusual situation where the pawn's attacking path and its walking path are completely separate from each other. A pawn sitting directly in front of an enemy pawn can block it, yet neither one can capture the other, since capturing requires that diagonal step. En passant. This is a special capturing rule that applies only in one narrow situation, when an enemy pawn uses its 2-square first move to land right beside your own pawn. In that moment, your pawn is allowed to capture it as though it had only moved 1 square, but this option must be used immediately on the very next move, or it is lost forever. The rule was introduced in the 15th century, after the 2-square first move was added, specifically to prevent pawns from slipping past each other untouched. Many beginners overlook en passant entirely, yet it remains a fully legal and sometimes decisive tactical resource. Pawn promotion. When a pawn manages to reach the far end of the board, all the way to the last rank, it does not stay a pawn any longer. Instead, the player must exchange it for a queen, rook, bishop, or knight of the same color, and this transformation happens instantly and is mandatory. Most players choose a queen because of her power, but there are rare situations where choosing a knight or another piece avoids a stalemate or sets up a more precise checkmate. This rule gives even the humblest piece on the board the potential to become the strongest one, which is part of why protecting advanced pawns late in a game becomes so critical. Pawn structure and doubled pawns. When a pawn captures another piece, it sometimes ends up on the same file as one of its own pawns, creating what is known as a doubled pawn formation. These doubled pawns cannot protect each other the way pawns on adjacent files can, since defense in pawn chains depends on diagonal support rather than pawns standing directly in front of one another. A player with doubled pawns often has to spend extra moves defending them, which can quietly drain energy away from other parts of the game. Passed pawns. A pawn is considered passed when there are no enemy pawns left on its own file or on either of the 2 neighboring files to stop its advance toward promotion. Because nothing but pieces can block or capture it, a passed pawn becomes increasingly dangerous as the board empties out during the later stages of a game. Strong players often sacrifice other material specifically to generate a passed pawn, understanding that its promotion threat can decide the entire outcome.